If the federal government was really shut down, how is it that President Trump and the Pentagon have been able to engage in drug war interventionism and military interventionism in the Caribbean near Venezuela? Join Richard Ebeling and me in this week's Libertarian Angle as we examine that question. Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Libertarian Angle. I'm joined by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, professor of economics at the Citadel. Richard, good to see you again.
Good to see you and to be with our viewers and listeners.
Okay, Richard, I got bad news for you. The government shutdown is over. Uh,
What?
yeah, I'm sorry to tell you this. It's been kind of a happy time in our lives with no government. I mean, the whole government shut down. And now it looks like it's finally over. How sad.
Well, I am sad, particularly since the government shutdown wasn't a government shutdown.
What are you talking about? They told us it
Well,
was a
first of all, the
shutdown.
United States employs well over 1 million people in the armed forces. They weren't shut down. They weren't told to go home on furlough. Uh, then the fact is that the civilian population employment force of the U.S. government is close to 3 million people. And at the most, it's estimated that the furloughed number of those were at the most 750,000. Uh, so virtually none of the national security state was put on furlough or shut down. All the essential welfare programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, basically untouched. Uh, uh, the State Department, with its embassies and ambassadorial staffs around the world, they weren't shut down. uh, Things have continued to go on in a whole variety of other areas. So out of 3 million employees, less than 1 million were sent home. And by the way, they're sent home, but they're still on the clock. They're going to be paid for all of their time sitting at home and then come back to the office. So the tragedy is it's a shutdown that wasn't a shutdown.
Richard, you are just too cynical. When our government officials say the government shut down, they've got to be telling us the truth. They wouldn't be lying about that.
Well, the last time there was a major shutdown like this, there was a cartoon. I still have it on my computer that showed a government building in Washington, D.C. with a huge banner in front of it. Welcome home, welcome back, non-essential personnel.
Yeah, I remember that at one of those shutdowns, I think they use a different phrase than non-essential. But there was this emotional trauma among all the people that had been declared non-essential, and they went into deep depression to be recognized as not really essential to the operation of the government. Uh, but you're right. From what I understand, they were continuing to pay the military during this entire time. How do they do that? If the government shut down, how do they get the money to pay for these? And you know darn well the CIA didn't get shut down, the NSA didn't get shut down, as you point out, the whole national security establishment, which, in my opinion, is the real center of the government. It didn't get shut down. I'm sure the federal prosecutors and the federal judges didn't get shut down. And like you say,
If I can just interject, the reason is that before the shutdown occurred, there were certain parts of this fiscal year's budget that had been voted on. And that included huge swaths of the military budget, the Department of War budget. So, in fact, the Democrats and Republicans had agreed on appropriations for the current fiscal year for some of these departments and agencies, and that's why there's been little or no shutdown in them. So it's just a smoke and mirrors. And by the way, what have they been arguing about? What have they been arguing about? Oh, will Obamacare be cut back? Will it be preserved? Will it be increased? And the Republicans and Democrats are all saying the same. Of course, we want these government programs. We just have to agree on ending the shutdown so then we can decide how much money we're going to spend on them. This has nothing to do with downsizing the government, either in terms of personnel or duties and responsibilities. It's just a circus that both parties use for their own political gains and ends.
Yeah, but what surprises me is that it went on so long because usually they're so scared that the American people are going to figure out that who cares? The government shut down, life went on. Okay, now lately there's been some cutbacks on flights, but rather minor event in the larger scheme of things. In other words, nobody cared. Life went on. People went to work. People went on their vacations, and that's got to scare the heck out of them. Where, oh my gosh, if they figure out that this thing can operate very well without all these non-essential workers. Now, your definition and my definition of non-essential is obviously different from their definition. But taking their definition, it's clear that life goes on without these non-essentials that they call non-essentials that I'm sure you and I would agree are non-essentials. So why doesn't Trump just continue on? Why do you have to strike a deal with them to reopen the government? As you point out, all these non-essentials are now going to come back. Trump's going to approve that, part of the deal, and they're going to get all back pay, which you and I said a couple of months ago was going to happen. Why should they get back pay? They haven't done anything. I mean, they've been sitting at home. But so they're saying that the Democrats caved because they gave up their Obamacare demands. But to me, Trump caved too, because he could have kept this thing going, saving untold amounts of money, letting people leave, encouraging them to leave. And therefore, you start downsizing the government. But I don't see there's much downsizing at all that's taking place here.
Well, you see, of course, the presumption is that Trump would want to downsize the government. Instead of all the rhetoric and bringing in Elon Musk to sort of do his sort of like you know uh, deciding how much can be with the Doge business, how much can be eliminated or cut back. The fact is, Trump doesn't believe in any cuts. He wants people to have their medical care. He wants the air traffic controllers to get their salaries. He wants to see that people are guaranteed to get their welfare benefits. He just wants he wants the same policies as the Democrats. He just a different emphasis, different rhetoric, and for different political purposes. But there is no difference between the Republicans or the Democrats. Only an occasional person like Rand Paul objects because he thinks actual cuts should be made in the government. But he's the few and far between. Both houses of Congress and virtually all members on both sides of the aisle believe in the same interventionist welfare state, foreign and domestic. They're just arguing over what, how much, and who should be given priority.
No, you're right. When you take the crown jewels of American socialism, the welfare state way of life that we've all been born and raised under, Social Security and Medicare, Trump and the Republicans are as big as supporters of those socialist programs as the Democrats. The only difference is they differ in degree on some of the welfare state programs, like Republicans might call for the end of food stamps, for example, or what they call SNAP now. Democrats would be fervently in favor of it. But what difference does it make? Trump has skyrocketing expenses for ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Border Patrol. So he just shifts the out of control spending and debt over to that area, or the military, like in the Caribbean. I mean, do you have any idea how much that's costing? I was reading this aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford. What an honor to be having this aircraft carrier named after former president. But I was reading that I don't remember the numbers, but just to move it there and keep it there is so horribly expensive that Trump has to do something about that. Now, I thought maybe we ought to just go ahead and segue into what's going on in the Caribbean there, because you talk about out of control spending. It's there. And this article said that he cannot afford to leave that aircraft carrier just stationary there. It's got to move for whatever reason. So he's really got himself into a fix there. If he's got this massive armada, he's over there attacking these boat people. I'm sure that all the combat troops that are in the Caribbean are going to get badges for these military victories that they've won over these boats. Um, but he has to make a choice here. Does he just withdraw, or does he attack Venezuela and oust Maduro from power? I don't see him withdrawing. I think he may have been bluffing. I think he thought that maybe Maduro could be pressured into leaving with this huge armada. But if he was bluffing, Maduro, at least as of right now, he may still leave. But as of right now, it looks like he's calling his bluff, which means that Trump either withdraws, in which case Maduro is going to call him a coward and I defeated the giant United States. The Pentagon had to run scared with their tail between their legs, or he attacks Venezuela and we get into another one of these infamous regime change operations.
Well, the problem then is if he invades Venezuela, what happens to his Nobel Peace Prize?
No, he's invading to establish peace.
Yeah, a piece of Venezuela.
Oh yeah, well the whole Venezuela Peace Prize thing is ridiculous anyway. Now, but he's
He's
now
the
he's
biggest peacemaker since Jesus.
he's pivoting toward Mexico too. He's saying that, oh well, I might have to set my sights on attacking Mexico. And so President Claudia Sheinbaum there, she's over there reacting hurriedly, sending troops down to this little town where this mayor was recently assassinated. Uh, so it's just more of the same though. That's what's so interesting is that people thought that Trump was going to be different. I don't see things are any different, Richard. I mean, this is just flagrant interventionism. A war where there's if he invades, I have no doubts of the outcome. I don't think those Venezuelan troops are going to sit there and sacrifice themselves for Maduro. I think they're going to quickly surrender. I don't think that civilian militia is going to sacrifice their lives. I mean, this guy is very unpopular. Trump's smart, and the Pentagon are smart. They know they've picked a target that is very unpopular there in Venezuela and in the world. I mean, he's pretty clear he did not win the last election. He's in there by force of the military. I think it's going to be a very easy thing to assassinate him, execute him, bring him back in chains, parade him down the streets of Washington like the old Roman emperors used to do. But so I don't think the result is in doubt militarily. But here we go again.
Well, the only thing that I think has to be weighing on Trump's mind is that, well, it seems like an easy win. Once you've won, how do you withdraw? Don't you have to stay there until the opposition can organize at least a coalition government? Then there's the transition to democratic elections. What if there are those who are Maduroites who go out into the jungles to keep fighting? Uh, what if the system starts imploding with factions not able to organize a government? Uh, what if some variation on what happened in Libya with the US and EU intervention in Libya? They get rid of Gaddafi, and literally the country breaks into parts, and that civil war is now going on ever since when Obama was president. So what are the consequences, both intended and unintended, for Trump to intervene here? Given his image, and he is an ego who places a high value on his image as the global peacemaker, and if he gets U.S. sucked in to the very type of unending wars that he condemned in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's you have a tiger by the tail, but their model is Noriega in Panama. When they were accusing him of being a drug dealer, they invaded. They killed, I don't know how many people. It's estimated dozens, maybe hundreds. But things went along fine. They brought Maduro back. They put him in the penitentiary. They convicted him, and there wasn't massive chaos as compared to, let's say, Guatemala
Right.
in '54 that sets off a civil war. They ousted the democratic elected president there, Jacobo Arbenz, and the civil war ends up killing 1 million people. And of course, people tend to forget that. And then there's Iran in '53, the year before, where they ousted the democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, and you get the Shah, and then you get the revolution against the Shah, and where we are today, this brutal Ayatollah system over there. So you don't know how this result. I mean, it may really play out as you say. Some commentators are saying that the situation is totally different from Panama because the military is so powerful in Venezuela. And they're hooked into Maduro. I mean, they're attached to him, just right there because they depend on the largesse, and they know that if he's ousted, they're going to lose their privileged part in Venezuelan society. So they may, if this guy's taken out, vie for control over Maria Machado and the guy that was elected that is now in Spain, the one who's elected president, or we think was elected president. So yeah, you could have massive chaos, like as you point out with Gaddafi and so forth. These things
Or,
are
or,
impossible to predict.
or the U.S. behind the scenes is trying to bribe segments of the Venezuelan military
Yeah, like they were doing in Chile during that regime change
to
operation.
overthrow Maduro and then have some type of transition where the military, quote, oversees a move to some form of, quote, democracy.
Yeah. Well, that in a sense, that's what that $50 million reward on Maduro's head is. I mean, it's a bribe saying if one of you in the military will kill this guy, we'll give you $50 million. And I'm surprised that there haven't been attempts. Maybe there haven't. We don't know about them, but $50 million is not a small amount of money. And the fact that they've accused him of being a narco and the leader of these narco cartels, Trump ordered the CIA to go into Venezuela.
Right.
Well, right there, that to me is an invasion. I mean, when you order your paramilitary force to go in there and do what it does, and obviously the CIA engages in assassinations, and so it's almost a certainty that they're trying to figure out a way to assassinate Maduro.
Well, one thing I'm sure is Maduro has made a decision not to step foot on any small boat.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, and not to sleep in the same place every night. I mean, I would think it's very difficult to hide with U.S. surveillance techniques, cell phones, and so forth. I would think that he's having to hide
You
every.
mean you mean all of that surveillance equipment and eavesdropping, that's not been furloughed as part of the shutdown?
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. I guess Maduro's been real happy over the shutdown, thinking, oh, they're not going to come and get me because the government shut down.
Yeah, the assassins were sent home on furlough.
Right, right, right. Uh, so yeah, it's going to be fascinating how this plays out. Now, let me throw out another twist there. The assumption is that Trump is calling the shots, and I don't believe it. I think it's the national security establishment that's calling the shots, and that Trump is just a figurehead. He's along for the ride, but I think it's the Pentagon and the CIA and the NSA that are calling the shots here. One of the interesting things about the end of the Cold War, they had used the Soviet Union as their official enemy for, 20 some odd years or so. And till 1989. And it was a big cash cow. I mean, the Cold War was a huge cash cow for the national security establishment. And when the Cold War suddenly ends, they were surprised and they were shocked and they were scared because people were talking about a peace dividend. And what they meant by a peace dividend was, hey, a radical downsizing of the budget for the national security establishment. Now, nobody was calling for the dismantling of the national security establishment and a restoration of our founding governmental system of a limited government republic, but they were talking about a peace dividend. And I'll never forget the Pentagon was saying, well, wait a minute, let's not be too hasty. We can play other roles, and one of these roles is enforcing the drug war. We can play a major part in the drug war. And so, how ironic. Here it is. They've got booted out of Afghanistan. They don't really have a war going on except Ukraine. They're using Ukraine as an agent, but a direct war where they're engaged. And I'm sure they're sitting there thinking, people might think, well, what do we need you for now? Well, of course, you need us to wage this war on drugs. How are we going to protect you from the drug dealers and so forth? So I think there's a good chance that it's the national security state that is pushing this regime change operation.
And by the way, on that theme, we should keep in mind the argument that critics of government intervention have often made that one government intervention inevitably leads to another. Why is Trump sending in this fleet down to the Caribbean against Venezuela? It's supposedly the drug dealing, right? The fentanyl and any other narcotics that they might be smuggling in. But why is it a concern? It's because there's a war on drugs here in the United States. The government has decided that and certainly since over a century ago, with the establishment of the Food and Drug Administration declaring hard narcotics as federally illegal, there's with the start of the U.S. government telling people what things they could ingest uh, through personal decision and free exchange in the marketplace has now led to a situation where it's not only repressing uh, the black market in drugs at home, but a military interventionism to suppress the black market in drugs in the view that they're viewing as one of its sources. So one intervention, a war on drugs at home, leads to another intervention, a war on drug smuggling on the high seas, which leads to this type of confrontation and threats of war. So one intervention leads to another.
I think that's an absolutely fantastic point that this is all rooted in this racket called the war on drugs. I mean, we've been calling for an end to this thing for the whole 36 years of FFF's existence. Milton Friedman had that great op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. When was it? Back in the 80s or so? Open letter to the drug czar, Bennett, and saying that this is a catastrophe, this war on drugs. There's only one solution: legalize drugs. And with the legalization of drugs, you'd get rid of all the cartels overnight
Yes.
because they can't compete in a legal market. It's the only way to get rid of the cartels. The more you crack down, you may bust one, bust another, like Pablo Escobar in the 80s in Colombia. Guy was making hundreds of millions of dollars. They finally killed him. Who cares? Okay, they still have 10 more cartels ready to take his place. And you're right, it's all rooted in this racket. And but Trump is a master at using this racket. I mean, he's killing these people, saying, well, they're transporting drugs. Well, my first question is, what gives the US the authority to kill people on the high seas that are transporting drugs? If you're not in US territorial waters, why don't you have a right to possess and transport and sell whatever you want to sell? This is the high seas. And then drug offenses are federal criminal offenses. We all know that. There's drug prosecutions in federal court. There have been for decades. He's just killing them based on accusations. That's not our system of government. The Fifth Amendment says no taking of life without due process. And when you got somebody that you've accused of a criminal offense, you indict them. You formally give them notice. You bring them before a federal court, a judge or a jury. You present evidence of guilt, and then you punish them. They're just killing them. I just read an article where Saudi Arabia uh, executed over 300 people so far this year, and two-thirds of them are for drug offenses. Now, I don't think anyone would deny that Saudi Arabia is a very dictatorial regime. And killing those hundreds of people, executing them, still hasn't won the war on drugs in Saudi Arabia because they haven't declared the end of the war on drugs. It keeps going on and on and on. Well, I don't see what the difference is between these extrajudicial killings that Trump and the Pentagon are doing and what's going on in Saudi Arabia.
In
Um,
essence, there's none. And I think to make your point, I think we should remember the failed war on alcohol, the Prohibition Amendment that went on from 1920 to 1933 when a new amendment repealed the Prohibition Amendment. And the fact is, it didn't stop alcohol production. It didn't stop alcohol smuggling and transportation. It didn't stop alcohol sale and purchase. All it did was drive it underground. And but what did we notice when that new amendment was passed that ended the Prohibition Act in 1933, and you could now legally manufacture, transport, buy, and sell alcohol? What happened to all the crime and alcohol? It was gone. The bootleggers were gone. Now they were just regular bars, restaurants, cafes. We just drugstore, liquor store. We just bought alcohol. All the crime disappeared once it was made legal. No gangland fighting over alcohol. No turf battles. No innocent victims caught in between, no bribes or district attorneys being bribed or blackmailed. Why? Because it wasn't a crime anymore. If you decriminalize drug use and drug production, buying and selling, you've ended that entire network of criminal activity, just as it ended with the ending of prohibition. But until that war is ended, all you do is you keep it underground for as long as people want to have something, are willing to pay for it, and there are others who are willing to bear the risk of violence to themselves as well as a term in prison to earn the profits that can be acquired by selling it to those who desire it. So as long as there's a demand for drugs, there'll be a supply of drugs. It is a war with no end.
All right, well, let me follow that point up by saying that why doesn't every nation have the prerogative of establishing its own drug policy? I mean, Portugal has legalized drugs, and all the reports say it's been a beneficial thing that they don't have violence and cartels and all that stuff because drugs it's a legal market, like as you point out with alcohol. Well, why doesn't Venezuela have that same prerogative? And if they want to legalize drugs or if they want to ignore drug distribution or drug manufacture, why is it that prerogative? Claudia Scheinbaum, it's just amazing to me that she doesn't recognize this. She's a very intelligent woman. And how can she not recognize that it's drug prohibition that has destroyed Mexico for over a decade? That's where the violence is in the crackdown. So what does she do? She's cracking down. Now, not as much as people want her to. There's people saying, oh, we got to do what Trump does. We get the Mexican military. They've tried that. And the more they try it, the more violence, the more assassinations, and so forth. Why doesn't she recognize that legalization is the way to put these people out of business? And if she did that, what would be Trump's and the Pentagon's response? That we're going to attack you because you've legalized drugs, because you have a different drug policy than the United States? Richard, they can't even control drug distribution in the United States. I mean, you got cartels operating here. I don't know what the number is, but tens of millions of Americans are getting their drugs. And they're
Yes.
getting their drugs by people who are distributing those drugs. If you can't stop it here, how can you go over there in Latin America and say, we're going to invade you for not stopping it in your countries? A little hypocrisy.
Because it's the old argument uh, of uh, of uh, of every interventionist. The intervention hasn't failed. The disappointments and the frustrations is that it wasn't enforced or pressed hard enough. If only we had spent more money, if only the restrictions were more severely bearing punishments, if only. Any other answer requires them to admit that they have been wrong. Wrong ethically, libertarians and classic liberals think it's not any of the government's business, and wrong in the sense that it's a futile war, that there is a war that is unending and cannot be won. Because I'll just repeat, as long as people want something and are willing to pay for it, and as long as there are others who are willing to supply it and run the risks of doing so illegally, the product will be manufactured, transported, sold, and bought. That's what the very nature of a black market is. It is a market that has just been declared illegal by the government, but it doesn't change the incentives, the motives, and the desires of both the buyers and the sellers. You can't make that go away. The only way you can make that go away is Nancy Reagan's statement, just say no. If nobody wanted the drugs, or it became a minimal demand in the marketplace, the supply, illegal or legal, would dry up. But until that happens, it is a futile crusade.
Well, and that raises a deeper question is why is America such a drug-addled society? I mean, it's obviously sufficiently drug-addled enough to have this whole war on drugs continue. And why is that? If this is such a great society with the welfare state and the regulated society and the drug war and the foreign interventionism and tariffs and trade wars and paper money and Federal Reserve, income taxation, IRS, why are so many people tripping out on drugs? It seems to me it reminds me of the Soviet Union when everybody was becoming alcoholics, because that's what people do in a sad, depressed environment. Now, the other thing that we ought to mention is the massive infringements on our own civil liberties here in the name of the war on drugs. You've got asset forfeiture, where they just steal money from people on the highways and literally steal it and say, oh, if you don't like it, you can sue us. But these poor people that they take all their money, $20,000 in cash, how can they hire a lawyer when they've just lost all their cash? Or they'll offer a deal. Well, we'll give you half. You let us keep half. It's just a crooked, corrupt deal. You've got no-knock raids. You've got violence, and it's the most racist government program since segregation, the war on drugs. It's no question it's disproportionately enforced against blacks and to a certain extent Hispanics. There is nothing redeeming about this government program. I keep thinking that the last two groups who are going to be favoring this program are the narcos, because they know they'd be out of business with drug legalization, and the drug war bureaucracy that depends on its continuation too.
There's a very fascinating book about the Prohibition period called Baptists and Bootleggers. And the theme of the of this book, it's an economic history book, is that who is for the Prohibition Act? And two groups, and for its remaining, that is, it's continuing on the books. Two groups. The self-righteous busybodies who wanted to tell you how to live your life, which he refers to the Baptists. And the other group are the bootleggers who didn't want the ending of prohibition because that was the source of their illegal gotten gains by having their private market cartels and turf wars and ability to bribe politicians and law enforcement agents to look the other way. So when you have, on the one hand, political paternalists who want to manage your life and those who will benefit from having monopoly positions by operating in an illegal market, then you have a combination that is very difficult to defeat. And part of the problem is you talk to most people. And if you say, well, do you think the United States should end the war on drugs? The vast majority of people say no. Oh, marijuana is one thing, but heroin, cocaine, fentanyl, this is killing our young people. Don't you care about our young people? And you combine that with the cartels, it's a tough nut to crack to get this off the books.
It's true, but at the very least, at least drug legalization is on the table. It is a respected position. People may not agree with it, but it's discussed in the mainstream press. It's out there. 36 years ago, when we started FFF, Richard, I remember we would do talk shows and on the radio talk shows. I could light up every single light on the phone by calling for drug legalization because people were so shocked over this notion. But libertarians stuck it out and kept promoting it. And that's the power of ideas. That today, okay, the majority of Americans are not yet with us, but I got a feeling that that could shift at any moment.
Well, you are right. The persistence and people seeing the futility of it, the cost of it, the infringements on their own family members' liberty can work. But it's a long, hard, and difficult path. It took people like Milton Friedman a long time to successfully persuade the government and those around the government to abolish the draft or even to legalize impartial use of marijuana. But yes, you're right. It's the only path to follow.
Yeah, and speaking of Friedman again, for the viewers, I highly recommend you find Friedman's piece. It was in the Wall Street Journal, right? That piece is either there or the New York Times. So
It was one or the other, I know.
but Google it. It's fantastic. It's an open letter to the drug czar Bennett. I forget,
Mhm,
Bill
mhm.
Bennett.
Bill Bennett, yes.
Uh, but anyway, we're out of time, Richard. But I'm sure some of you may be wondering, well, where's Ron Paul? He was supposed to be our sixth and final speaker on our series on the critical importance of civil liberties. He had a conflict this week, so we've rescheduled to next week. So he'll be our final speaker in our series on the critical importance of civil liberties, or I should say, as he's widely known, the great Ron Paul.
The great Ron Paul, yes.
Richard, as always, greatly enjoyed the visit. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for your great support of FFF. Without your support, we couldn't do programs like this. Thank you.
Until next time.